Good evening. I got 7 o'clock and I call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Greg David,
Present.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Here.
Mr. Tyler Dean,
Here.
Mr. John Welch,
Present.
and Miss Emily Hamburg.
Here.
And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. This evening we have retired pastor and Bel Aire citizen John Burkett is to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. As we leave behind our national celebrations, we come before you to seek your leading and guidance as we serve the greater good of one another and our community. You have said, "Blessed are the peacemakers," for we know that it is more difficult to bring a just peace than it is to cause conflict and violence. But we pray for our leaders to work for peace and justice for all of your children, that we may be led by a vision of compassion and hope. May all who lead our people seek justice and mercy and peace for the common good. We especially remember our president and vice president and our Congress as we pray for the leaders of all nations, especially for a change of heart for Vladimir Putin as he seeks to destroy the nation and people of Ukraine. We pray for the people of Ukraine and the people of all nations who suffer war, that they may live in peace inside their own borders and beyond, as we pray that we will responsibly use the freedom others have sacrificed for us to have today. As we pray, we remember the flooding in Vermont and all the rescue workers, that you will watch over them and keep them safe and in your care as they provide for the safety of the people in their jurisdiction. Be with our city leaders, guide them as they govern and lead our city. Be with those who protect the common good, our police and sheriffs, our firefighters, and our EMTs, as they work with the difficulties set before them. Give them the ability to think quickly and justly, and keep them safe and in your care. Keep all who live in our community safe and free to live without fear. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please join me in the pledge of allegiance to the American flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is determine agenda additions. Are there any additions to consider? Hearing none, I'll move on to consent agenda. The consent agenda only contains the minutes of the June 20th, 2023 regular city council meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith,
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. David. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Next item is discussion and approval of appropriations ordinance. So this appropriating period includes payment for the new Spartan mower, $14,100. UMC was paid $301,880 for full payment for the Hanover water line replacement project, plus 26 new water service installs and sewer point repairs. And there's also $122,522 went to Kansas Paving for Bristol Hollows and $188,000 to CCUA for debt service. I entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean,
I'll motion to accept appropriations ordinance 23-12.
Second.
motion by Mr. Dean and second by Ms. Hamburg. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. City requested appearances. We have no city requested appearances. I do have one citizen's concern. So Mr. John Barquette, if you would like to come to the podium and please state your name and address for the record. And then
John
3
Barquette,
minutes.
6223 Perryton Street in scenic Bel Aire. I'll make this quick. I was very disappointed when I read in a recent paper that we extended the fireworks season to 7 days. And I'm a person who grew up with them. I shot my share off. But that was before we had a number of veterans who have had to go through a lot of recent wars who have PTSD. 1 to 2 days should be more than sufficient. If If you need the tax revenue from fireworks sales, I suggest you find it from someplace else. But that is my primary concern. My secondary concern is one of the things that makes the city great is there are a lot of dogs here, maybe as many as people. There's at least 15 within a 3-house radius of my home, which is a good thing, keeps the crime down. But also, dogs get spooked by it. And for many of us, we stay at home throughout the season. Now, 2 days to stay at home is not bad, but 4 to 6, it starts to be an inconvenience. So I think limiting the fireworks time that you can shoot them off would be great. If it was just the firecrackers and the old stuff like the Roman candles, those are reasonable. But we're getting stuff that shake the house, and it makes it a lot more difficult for those who live in our city, especially the veterans and as many of our animals. That concludes my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
No problem.
Any other citizens hearing? Seeing none, I'll move on to council member reports. Ms. Hamburg, would you like to give a report?
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the en banc meeting with the CCUA on the 22nd. I know you were traveling, but all 5 city council members were there. It was a pretty limited meeting. Park City's council, legal counsel advised them to strictly and narrowly stick to this year's proposed budget. So it was a fairly short meeting. Want to thank the rec center for the conclusion of the t-ball season. Our kids played for the first time, and it was enjoyable and low stress and low cost as usual. So thank them and all the volunteer coaches. Also just want to congratulate Catholic Care on the opening of St. Veronica yesterday. They started that project about a year ago to bring 20 new beds for senior behavioral health to their Catholic Care campus. So congratulations and best wishes to them as they serve seniors in our area. That's all I have, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Welch.
I'd kind of like to talk about fireworks too. Overall, I believe there were less fireworks this year. However, we still had people that would not follow the laws. There was fireworks going off late at night, as late as 1 o'clock and after, which was 2 hours well past the deadline. There were still people shooting those fireworks off Wednesday and Thursday night, which was 2 days past the deadline. So I don't know what we can do about that, but we got to figure out something. And it disturbed me. I mean, they were like a block south of me. It was not like they were off in the distance. Wichita, you can't blame it on Wichita. And it was even worse. They wouldn't just go out and shoot them off and get done. They were spacing it out 15, 20 minutes apart. So you'd just get relaxed and another one would go off. So I don't know what we can do, but we got to figure something out. And unless we just make it a free for all on fireworks, they're going to be breaking the law, and we got to do something to stop that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you. As Councilmember Hamburg mentioned, we did have that en banc meeting on the 22nd, which I attended. We also had a CCUA special meeting on the 29th, which I attended. The primary purpose of that meeting was to approve a response letter to the KDHE regarding a letter they had previously sent us requesting a response about more short-term and interim plans regarding the facility's effluent. So that response was approved and sent, and really focused on highlighting the work that both Park City and Bel Aire are doing in terms of their pretreatment program and the impact that pretreatment program will have on the wastewater that leaves the plant. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. David.
I also attended the CCUA meetings and have nothing further to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Dean.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a little bit longer report than normal since we've been gone a few more weeks, so bear with me, but I won't add to that. I was at the same meeting. I think everybody covered that en banc meeting pretty well. Wanted to touch on the save the date that they started announcing. National Night Out date was selected Friday, 8/11 here at City Hall. Our Bel Aire Police Department will be hosting that annual event, so definitely invite people to come out. And I think there are also still some availability they're going to kind of hold like a vendor fair, if you will. So there'll be vendors that have space available for free, so they can actually get with Officer Kreis with Bel Aire PD to reserve a spot. So just wanted to put that plug in. Also, I attended the Bel Aire Parks Master Plan Open House. I know that's a mouthful. A few weeks back, it was hosted at the Rec Center. It was a great event, lots of feedback. I won't steal the Rec Department's thunder because I know they'll be presenting to us with some of the results of that shortly, but just wanted to say thank you to our Rec staff, the consulting firm that we're working with, and it was a great turnout. So it was great to see everybody there. Also today, actually, Bel Aire Summer Day Camp did a fishing day at Alley Park, and I actually helped volunteer. It was a great time to help some 30 children try to fish. That's always a fun time, but it's really nice introducing them to it if they haven't been, and dealing with all the things that goes along with teaching them on that. So, and then lastly, this one's a little bit longer. I'm going to read from it, so I hopefully stay on task. So the Woodlawn project, there has been some concerns brought to me from multiple parents that have received notices from USD 259 relating to busing routes. It was brought to our attention. Staff is aware. It was forwarded to staff. And so we have had communications with USD 259. I have had personal communications. I'm a little concerned with it. The fact is, what they're saying is that the busing, based on their current policy, that they will not be busing from some of those areas east on Woodlawn because of sidewalk availability. And I totally understand their policy as it reads. It's kind of a hazardous condition policy that they have in place, that once the sidewalks are in, then the hazard isn't present and the busing, it doesn't continue. The situation is a little concerning to me because the construction project isn't finished. There will be active construction occurring in and along the sidewalk and the street. That is why I have passed that information on to those folks and advocated for some of the students and families in our community. I wanted to make sure that the public was aware of that. And the best thing I could tell them to do is to advocate with USD 259 to get a hold of their transportation department. Lisa, I believe, is the correct contact. It's pretty easy to find on their website. I'd suggest anybody that's listening that's concerned about busing to contact USD 259 and advocate with them, as well as Board of Education for USD 259 members can hear your concerns as well. I just wanted to make sure people knew they were being heard, that those letters had went out. We've seen them and we're doing what we can to help, but the more voices they hear, the better. So that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you for reaching out to 259 about the busing issue. On Saturday, July 8th, I attended the SCAC meetings, Sedgwick County Association of Cities, at WSU. I had to leave early in order to attend a funeral. However, while I was still there, SCAC voted to reduce annual fees from $150 to $100. So they're looking into idea of promoting a scholarship for city clerks. There are some 600 communities in the state of Kansas, only about 50 certified city clerks. So this may be a good way to encourage city clerks to gain certification. Our own Melissa Kriebel is one of the 50 certified city clerks in the state of Kansas. So lastly, there was a motion to move the SCAC funds to Sedgwick County and close the SCAC bank account. This motion failed on a vote of 5-6. I voted against the move. And I left the meeting at this point, and so I have no additional information on what transpired. This afternoon, I attended the WAMPO monthly TBD meeting. WAMPO is sending a card, congratulations, to Calvin Reed on being appointed as the Secretary of KDOT. WAMPO now has a full-time senior accountant on staff. There is an upcoming Walk Bike Rural Kansas Active Transport Summit, September 20th through 22nd in McPherson. So if those might be interested in that. There's a collaboration effort being put together with Wichita Sports Commission, KDOT, and many sports venues, including WSU, K-State, KU, Intrust Bank, several of them, on a ride share for people to reduce the rate of DUIs. I understand this is regardless of substance influence, the substance of influence. They are working with Uber and Lyft to put together a program and want to expand this to bars and restaurants as well. So, you know, if you've ever had experience with anybody who's been injured from a DUI, it's really tragic. I had a friend get killed in that many years ago. So that's a good effort that they're trying to do. So some good news on traffic fatalities year to date for the state of Kansas. We're down 5.2% at 199 for the entire state. Hopefully that trend will be improved as the year goes on. Seatbelt usage is about 86%. So I wonder about the 14% non-users. Seatbelts are the most significant highway vehicle improvement I've seen in my lifetime. And I do remember the day when there weren't seatbelts in cars. So it's made a huge difference in traffic survivability, crash survivability. And lastly, some carbon reduction funding was approved. Part of this was $293,242 for the walk bike path along 53rd between Woodlawn and Oliver. So that is allocated for the 2024 year and will be needed to be added to the TIP in October. We will be discussing the 53rd Street project at tomorrow's workshop. So please continue to support the businesses along Woodlawn during this construction. Things are moving along, but we still have to endure this for a few more months. I'll now ask our city attorney for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since our last meeting, I've been involved with some projects involving looking at contracts, looking at policies. I've also responded to some civilians who have had questions. And right now I'm preparing for a continuing legal education program in Kansas City next week.
Very good. Thank you. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Wanted to talk a little bit about water towers. So one thing that was done, if we actually had some comments on the South Water Tower, which is basically the round water tower by Sunrise, was power washed. And Bel Aire actually has 2 water towers. That's one, and it's 500,000 gallon tank. And then the other tank we have is a 1 million gallon tank, which is right next to Isley. And what happens if you drive by and look underneath of the tank gets kind of moldy. You can kind of see a brownish, blackish film on it. It has no effect on the water whatsoever in the tank. But what happens is in the summertime when we're filling the tanks, that's basically well water, cold water going into them, and the tanks sweat. And then because it's in the shade, it gets some mildew. And so that's what causes the color. Like I said, it doesn't affect the drinking water whatsoever, but it can affect the paint. So that's why it's important and that we will power wash the tanks every couple of years to save the paint. Typically, paint will last about 10 years on a water tower. But it's important to keep that mold off the bottom of the tank because that's what will eat away at your paint. So if you drive by, the tower looks a lot brighter now, and that's because it was power washed. And like I said, I just wanted citizens to know it has no effect whatsoever on the drinking water. It just kind of helps save the paint on the tank, and it does make it look kind of nicer when it's all clean. So that's all I had, Mayor.
Okay. Well, the tank does look a lot nicer. I noticed that myself. So thank you for getting that done. All right. We'll move on to ordinances, resolutions, and final actions. So first item is scope of services with TranSystems for the Integra site access transportation plan. So with the potential of Integra locating K254 in Rock, new businesses building in the Sunflower Commerce Park, and new residential developments occurring along 53rd Street, the city needs to be proactive in determining required street improvements along Rock, Webb, and 53rd. So city manager and I have discussed the study for Bel Aire during our meeting with KDOT. Secretary Reed asked if we could include the intersection of K254 and Rock and Webb in the study. So TranSystems was the company that came to mind from all parties as they have done work in the area for Bel Aire, Integra, and KDOT. So Brett Latowski, I hope I didn't butcher your name, is here from TranSystems, and he will explain the study and answer questions. So Mr. Latowski.
Mayor, council members, good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'll make this short.
This is a continuation of the traffic impact study we did for the Integra site. The first one we did was strictly what impacts the Integra site and their proposed developments would have on the network. This is a continuation. This will include the traffic volumes and increases on 254, and we're going to look from 69th Street to 37th Street on Rock Road and Webb Road. It's a continuation. We'll also be looking at the development or the plating of what GLMV and Integra are going to be doing, how that will integrate with Webb and Rock Road. Ty and I had a really good meeting with KDOT this morning. KDOT has reviewed our scope. They had zero comments. And I think it was an overall agreement that this is the appropriate scope for this level for where the Integra development is at this time. And so with that, I would open up to any questions.
Yeah, Mike Morality told me at the WAMPA meeting about that you guys had met, so that was good. And he was very, very positive about what you guys had to say. So good. So
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I have one question. Brett, just to clarify for the public, when you say 37th to 69th, this is going a mile north of 254.
Yes,
Is that
we wanna-
approximately?
Yes, there's proposed developments north of 254. And so we want to understand how that's going to impact on the north side of 254 as well as on the south side of 254.
Gotcha. For both Rock and Webb.
That's correct.
It does not include Greenwich.
Yes, we will include Greenwich as well. Sorry.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Woodlawn included in that as well?
It is not.
It is not. Okay. All right. Very good. So I know that you've already done a lot of the work, and so this is really more just bringing it all together into a report, pretty much. Is that right? Are you going to need to do any traffic studies, additional traffic studies?
We are going to be doing additional traffic counts.
Okay.
So we can identify where turn lanes need to be on Webb and Rock. Does Rock Road need to be a 3-lane, and what those limits would be? So there is going to be some additional traffic studies, but it's taking from what we've done and moving forward. We're not backing up at all. We're just continuing to move forward. So it's just getting more detailed than what we did with the Integra site. The Integra site was strictly for Integra and what the immediate impacts would be. That's a requirement for most cities and the DOT. This is really looking from Bel Aire's perspective of what the whole development and what we're hearing is could happen both north and south of 254. So it's looking at Webb, Rock, and Greenwich. So it's a little bit bigger, higher level.
Will you be proposing what type of interchange would be at any of those intersections with 254?
So as a part of our Integra study, we made some recommendations for interchanges on 254, and we have presented that to both GLMV Integra, as well as a meeting with KDOT with GLMV and Integra.
Okay.
And KDOT is evaluating those at this time.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. David.
could you just explain to everyone listening why this isn't part of the K254 study, why we need to expand upon that?
So the 254 study that's being done by KDOT's really focused more just on 254. And it's a higher level study, and their timeline is a lot longer than what Integra's timeline is going to be. If Integra were to be selected in October timeframe, things are going to have to move very fast, and that is, and KDOT in some of our meetings has agreed that this development from basically Rock to Greenwich needs to move a lot faster if Integra is selected. So what KDOT has decided is the work that we're doing here will be given to KDOT and Garver, who's doing that study, and be put into their development or into their report. But theirs is a little bit higher level and a much longer time frame than what this one is.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
when you think about this study being completed and the output that's going to come from this study, what are some decisions that we will make that leverage this study data? Like, I'm trying to think, how's this study going to be applicable to the decisions that we're going to make?
So we'll be looking at whether 3 lanes from Rock Road, 3 lanes on Rock Road down to 37th Street would need to be, and there we have to work with the city of Wichita, because from 45th Street south is actually in the city of Wichita's property or their city limits. Looking at turn lanes at specific intersections along Webb Road. Are they left turn lanes? Are there decel lanes, acceleration lanes? And ultimately, that would be an expense that the city would have to make some decisions on at some point in the future.
Will you be reviewing like the speed limits as well? Is that part of it? Like, there have been
Yeah.
some changes along there.
Yes, I mean, we'll look at what intersection spacings are, where those turn lanes are, acceleration, deceleration lanes. So we can look at all that.
What kind of time frame are you looking at doing your study in? I didn't
Our
think I saw-
contract, we are saying we'll have everything done by September of 2024. But we can accelerate some of that. It just a lot depends on what happens with Integra.
Okay, but as I understand Integra, if they get the funding, if they make an announcement in October, they're going to put shovels in the ground right away.
Yes, and they are looking at ribbon cutting, I believe, in 2025.
Right.
So, I mean, we will have a lot of our information will be in early first, second quarter next year. Then it's just putting the report together, submitting that to the city and KDOT, giving them time to review. Once we get those comments back, addressing those comments and submitting the final report. But the hard information will be in early next year. The real detailed information should be looking for.
This is a significant concern to me because we need KDOT to help us get going with this, with any infrastructure changes right away, because Integra wants to open in 2 years. They're going to need the infrastructure to support that in 2 years. Well, that's not going to happen if we wait another year before we have anything started.
We did talk to KDOT this morning about that. And this timeline actually works within theirs. As you know, they have the local consult meetings that will be taking place in October of this year. And then some point in the first quarter, second quarter next year, they'll be making their announcements of what projects get put into the design pipeline. So we'll have all this hard data available to KDOT before they have to make any of those decisions. That's our timeline. And then the final report would follow up after that.
And they're comfortable they can help support the project, the Integra project, within that same time frame.
I didn't hear the question.
KDOT's comfortable they can support the Integra project within that time frame that they need by 2025.
I don't know that I can't answer for KDOT what decisions they're going to make. What we can do is provide the information for them in advance of making any pipeline decisions. So they will have all the information as to what our recommendations will be. But I can't answer to what KDOT's decisions would be.
Okay. What, do you have any plans for public engagement in any of this study that you're doing?
It's a great question. We talked about that at length this morning. And at this time, KDOT feels that this is not the appropriate time to do public involvement. If Integra is selected in October, then that would likely change. And then we'd have to decide whether it's a part of this contract or something that KDOT does. They're just not sure what that mechanism is going to be. There are some environmental studies that would need to be done, which typically is where KDOT holds those public involvement meetings.
Okay. I was of the impression some of those environmental studies had already been done for Integra, but maybe there's additional ones that need to be done.
There was probably a desktop that was completed. There would be a whole NEPA process that would need to take place.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
I'm a little bit confused. It seems like a lot of the conversation is centered around providing information to KDOT. But KDOT's doing their own study. My understanding was that this study was for us to give us information about how we would plan for Integra and do infrastructure projects to support Integra. And if that's the case, I agree with your comments that we need this information sooner than next year. So can you provide some clarification on, like, are we the customers of this data? Is this for this study for us so that we can make decisions, or is it for KDOT and really just needs to be part of the KDOT project?
So this is a Bel Aire study. This is for you. KDOT will not look at necessarily the arterial roadways. That's the city's responsibilities, not KDOT's. KDOT's focused on 254. So a lot of what we're looking at is on Rock Road, Webb Road, and Greenwich. So it is for the city. It is to make recommendations to the city on improvements along Rock Road and Webb Road and Greenwich.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean.
I just want to point something out, and I could be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong, Ty, but from reading through it, it seemed to me that Calvin Reed suggested that this is a first step to studies that would support our design, but also would inform some KDOT design on 254. And I think the comment was made that this would be a part of some sort of a match of KDOT funding, grant funding. Is that correct? Or am I hearing that?
Yeah, so this is kind of one of those unique, if Integra comes, if they don't, because I know that's a concern that we all have about spending money. And then if Integra doesn't come, then what? Well, so part of our discussion this morning was with KDOT is that even before Integra was ever mentioned or that was all zoned up there, we know that because of safety studies that KDOT's done that Webb, Greenwich, and Rock are the deadliest intersections of the whole 254 corridor. So they knew even before any of this discussion came about that something needed to be done up there. So in our discussion this morning, that was one of my questions to KDOT was that, you know, if something would happen and Integra didn't get their CHIPS funding, are you still going to make some improvements? And they said, yes, we still have to do that because the crashes up there warrant intersection improvements. So how did this become KDOT / Bel Aire? When the mayor and I met with the secretary, he recognized that they're doing a corridor management plan study right now. You know, we're participating in that as well as all the other cities and counties along the corridor. And but that's a study to look at the entire corridor. There are going to be, and they've already had public input. There's going to be opportunities for additional input along the whole corridor, and they'll be looking at overpasses and interchanges and closing intersections and things like that. And that won't be done probably till the beginning of next year as well. Our concern was that the local consults for KDOT and really the legislature on what they're going to be putting in the pipeline for the next 2 years. Again, they only do these every 2 years. So if we can't hit this one, it's another 2 years before we can get anything in the pipeline. So we knew we needed to get something in front of the legislature in October, because that's when the consults are. And so KDOT's concern was they weren't sure that they would have any kind of ideas of what to do there. And so the mayor and I were talking that we needed to look at what are our, you know, if Integra comes or this development occurs, what do we need to do? Because we know we've got to make some improvements as well. And KDOT said, you know, if we could kind of partner, if you could include in your study looking at those interchanges or those intersections and maybe give us an idea that they could, you know, initially just sign off on that. Yeah, that seems appropriate. With some financial data, we could go to the local consults and get it on that list so that depending on what happens into the end of the year, at least it would be on that list for funding. And if Integra would come, everything speeds up. It's got to be done in 2 years. If Integra doesn't, we've got more time to make those improvements and such. The fee Bel Aire is paying for, but whenever KDOT does major projects like what they're talking about up there, including a frontage road, they look for local municipalities to partner with. So Sedgwick County, Keachai, us, depending on where they are and what improvements are going to be made, they're going to ask us for assistance. And what the secretary said, if you could do this for us, it helps them out. Then we would use that dollar amount as a local match for whatever improvements that we're going to make and we're going to ask you to help with. So it's kind of it's really one of those win-win partnerships where KDOT doesn't have to do all of the things that we've done to get this study. We've kind of tag teamed with them because they're going to look at those interchanges or intersections, but they're also going to be looking at our roads. If it's approved tonight, Brett and I will start meeting with the Wichita, Sedgwick County, the Keachai, because what happens is going to affect them as well. And so we're going to kind of start that process to bring those partners in. And as Brett said, that's why it finishes up in September. A lot of the initial stuff will be done by October, so we can go to the local consult. And then once we know what Integra is doing, then they can go back and finish up and say, okay, if Integra is coming, these are the things that you need to do. If they don't, then we still believe these things need to happen or it needs to look a little different.
Are you saying September of 2023 and October of 2023?
So that's
because we just heard second quarter of 24.
So that's when the total project and study would be completed. What we're wanting and what they'll provide to us and KDOT is by October, the local consults of 2023 will have some ideas and some suggestions with some dollars of what we take to the local consult. So at least we get it on the list.
The local consult is early October. It's like October 5th.
Yep.
And I think there might be a 6th
of this year.
Yeah, but I'm still concerned if we don't nail things down before second quarter of next year, we won't have budgeted any money for it. We'll only have a year to get it done. If we're trying to get Integra open in 2025, we won't have time to get contracts out, much less construction. Well, look how long Woodlawn's taken. And that's only 1 mile. If we have to do 3 miles of rock road, how's that ever going to get done in less than a year?
Well, I think there's some opportunities where you can phase the improvements because Integra, the traffic impact study that we did for Integra was for their ultimate, the development that they are, which is not going to be built in the first phase. They have a couple phases to build all that out. So you do have a little more time to build things in phases. You could do things closer to 254, maybe the first mile along Rock and Webb, which would need to be part of the first phase. So you have the opportunity to phase some of this in, and that's something we'll be looking at.
Well, that still concerns me because if we're putzing around with Rock Road that late, do they have alternate inputs? They can traffic inputs. We can't close Rock Road once they get up there and start using it.
So that's some of the things we'll be working with JLMV Integra as we look through their plating as to where they want their access points. We've got a pretty good idea, but that is part of this study of how to provide access to them.
Okay, I'm not 100% comfortable.
So Brett, your the workload and stuff. Is it possible to adjust you think you could have this done by the end of 2023, or what do you feel like with your workload and
I think we can have the proposed improvements done this year, but like you mentioned, we need to wait and find out what happens with Integra, because if Integra does get selected, that's one path we have to go down. If Integra doesn't get selected, then that's a different path that we would want to go down, because you wouldn't want to stay on that accelerated schedule. So yeah, I think we can get the improvements for Integra, what needs to happen.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is to be able to satisfy Integra, we have to not plan any other construction until we know what happens to Integra. So we can't put a bid out this fall for a $2 million project next year, because we may need that $2 million to do something to Rock Road.
mean, right now, we don't have we're not working on any kind of design to bid something this fall.
Okay, but we've got other roads that need improvements. If we spend money on them, we won't have the money for Rock Road, is what I'm saying.
Ty, I'd defer that to you.
Yeah, really what this study is doing is going to determine what the roads need to look like. It's not going to be a design that we could bid, because if we're actually going to design a road, you're looking at 10 months to 12 months and $1 million just to design it. So this is really, again, what we're trying to get out of this is so that when we go to the local consults, that's where KDOT funds projects, we're going to ask for assistance for our roads as well. Now, whether we get it or not, I don't know. The key is to actually get it on their priority list. And that's what we need. And we can't go in with just staff and Ann saying, well, this is what we think it needs to be, and we need $20 million for it. So that's what TranSystems is going to do, is they're going to look at our roads. They're going to look at what they think needs to happen at the interchanges of 254 and Rock and Webb, give us kind of a layout of how that looks and what the cost is so that we can get it on the list.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
is there a specific contract that will follow at a future meeting on this? What we have before us is a proposal, and where I'm at on it is I think I understand why we would need to do this. It sounds like a good idea. My only concern is making sure we're committed to the deliverable that we need for October. If the full study isn't what we need, then that's fine. Don't need to, accelerate that beyond what is needed. But if it sounds like we have specific deliverables that are needed for a specific date in October, and that is our main catalyst for doing this study, I want clarity in our contractual agreement that that is what we're going to get for this.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Hamburg.
just to clarify, I really, as I read it, it was like a twofer. We're trying to look down the road and get the best deal with the $90,000, which I wanted to bring that up too. You and I talked a bit that even if Integra doesn't come, that $90,000 is good for a match. And that's a guarantee because he said it and there were multiple people there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So what if council tabled it and we, Brett, we put some type of statement that what we needed for the local consult would be delivered by that point, and then the final report would be delivered by a different date. Would you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, we can talk offline on that, sure.
Okay.
So you'd have that decided by next meeting? We could table this till the next meeting?
Yeah. Well, our next meeting is
Next Tuesday.
Next week?
we could discuss that and have that together this week. And
That 1 week delay, is that going to be a significant problem?
No.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean.
I just wanted to point a few things out. I knew felt like there's a lot of angst here of how fast this is going to have to happen. And I appreciate that because I'm in the same boat. I feel like this isn't fast enough, but we don't actually know yet. Right. So I'm trying to focus on what we can control, which it feels like this study is the right thing to do. It feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're trying to do it as fast as we can. We've selected TranSystems for a reason. There's a lot of information they already have. They're not starting over. This is probably the fastest we're going to be able to do it, right? I mean, so part of me is, I agree with Justin. I think we need to tie the deliverables to the consult, because I do think that's the whole reason for starting and getting down this path. And so I appreciate that. And I will support it if we put that in there.
Mr. Mayor.
So let me ask a quick question. Would we be wiser to table this or to approve this with the provision that you're going to work out the term to have the deliverable by October?
I would rather just table it and then let Brett and I kind of talk through some of the concerns you had, make sure we get those addressed.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Smith?
Make a motion to table the scope of services.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smith and second by Mr. Welch. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. It's tabled till next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is a contingency fee agreement with Foulston Siefken LLC. So as we are currently working the 2024 budget, we've seen the cost of electricity for streetlights run close to $100,000 per year. So Foulston Siefken's law firm handles utility rate cases around the U.S. and believes there is a case to be made that Evergy should maintain a special rate for street lighting in Kansas. They have approached the League of Kansas Municipalities about creating a coalition to request such a special rate through the KCC. This letter engages Foulston Siefken to act on Bel Aire's behalf for petitioning a reduced rate. The only fee Bel Aire would pay is if a new rate is approved. They would receive a portion of the savings from year one. Our city manager and city attorney can answer questions. But this is a contingency fee issue. It would cost us no money if they don't get a rate reduction.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
I thought it was.
Tyler's thinking hard though.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
the only thought that I was having is this the rate that they save? Is it only for the first year, or are we writing them a check every year for the savings moving forward?
Well, I'll defer to our city attorney about that.
That's the first year.
Just the first year.
And the savings after that continues to us.
Correct.
And are they petitioning for a rate that applies to all cities, or are they petitioning for the city of Bel Aire to have a unique and specific rate that applies to Bel Aire?
They are going to ask for a rate reduction. The Kansas Corporation Commission is going to make a decision as to what is the appropriate rate for streetlights. It's not focused on a municipality, but it's focused on streetlights specifically. One of the things that they had mentioned is that the rate is higher than other jurisdictions in other states, and they're trying to get it to be lower to the same level as what is an electric vehicle. I want to pull that out real quick.
Yeah, I thought it was like 24 cents a kilowatt.
Exactly. So that's
or
what the
1,000
goal
kilowatts.
is. That's what the hope is.
So is there a certain number of cities that have to sign up for this program for them to do the work? Because it sounds like if it works, everyone benefits, but whoever's signed the agreement pays for it. So do all the cities have to sign up before they're going to do the work, or does it just need to be one big city in the state of Kansas that signs up and writes the check? How does that work?
That's a good question. There is no requirement right now. I did ask Foulston Siefken how many cities have signed up to today. So far, 5 have signed up. I can't tell you which specifically those municipalities are, but it stands to reason we could potentially be the 6th.
Are they going to do this no matter how many cities sign up, or they have a?
I don't know the answer to that question. I did
If
not
it's
ask.
Just us, they'd only get like $5,000 out of it. So
Right. I did not ask that question.
Yeah, I assume this is kind of a interesting deal because it started several months ago, and they approached a number of cities and asked if we would be interested in signing up for this. Only when they first initially did it, the agreement looked totally different. I mean, they wanted a % for a number of years of the savings, and if they weren't successful, then we had to pay a portion of the attorney fees and all those kind of things. And of course, they started reaching out to a number of cities, and the cities were all kind of like us. Well, that's kind of open-ended. And if you don't win, we're paying. And if we do win, we're paying a lot. And so, basically my comment back to them after our first discussion was, why don't you do like Devon James? And if you win, you pay. And if you don't, you don't. And all of a sudden, if they didn't get any cities sign up, and then they turned around and came back with this, which really seems like a much better agreement. And that's why cities are now starting to join. I'm sure there's a number they've got in their mind that, they want to pay for their attorneys and their experts and stuff. So there's probably a number of cities, and it could be one city like Wichita, or it could be 10 cities like Bel Aire. But now that everybody's seeing this new agreement, more and more cities are starting to come on. Like Justin's saying, well, is it fair that we pay a portion and everybody benefits? That's a good question. But if we would save $50,000 a year, maybe it's worth paying $20,000, even if no one else signs up. So it's really a policy decision. You guys will have to think through.
I have no problem with other cities benefiting if they don't pay, as long as we're not paying too much to do this.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Hamburg.
Yeah, I appreciate Justin's free rider question, and that's a great question that I hadn't really considered. But since it is a contingency fee and it's all upside and no real downside, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to accept the contingency fee agreement with Foulston Siefken to serve as counsel for Bel Aire, who will be a member of the Streetlights Alliance for Fair Energy Rates Coalition, SAFER, in the rate case 23-EKCE 775 RTS, and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Hamburg, a second by Mr. Smith. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. So the next item is executive session, and I would like to ask for a 30-minute executive session for attorney-client privilege.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for the sole purpose of discussing the subject of attorney-client consultation regarding contractual obligations pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 for consultation with an attorney for the public body or agency which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. Invite the city manager, city attorney, and Jennifer Hill. The meeting will be for a period of 30 minutes. I hope that's long enough. And the open meeting will resume in council chambers at 7:55 p.m.
Your second, Mr. David? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're in executive session for 30 minutes.
Okay, we held an executive session. No binding action was taken. I'm calling the meeting back to order. And I understand there's a desire to extend executive session, so entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Hamburg.
I'm going to make a motion to extend the executive session for 15 minutes and have regular meeting resume at 8:15 PM.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Hamburg, second by Mr. Dean. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. We're back in executive session for 15 more minutes. I'm going to call the meeting back to order, and we held an executive session. No binding action was taken, and I think we're ready to move on to discussions and future issues. So tomorrow, we do have a regularly scheduled workshop tonight, and I said tomorrow, but tonight we do after this meeting, and a special workshop tomorrow at 6:30 PM. So does anyone have anything else we need to discuss in this meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Welch. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, too bad. The motion passes 5-0. We are just adjourned, and I'm going to give us about